Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It's absolutely fabulous that so many of you are coming back for the closing ceremony, and I can promise you we're going to have a very, very interesting last hour here all together, because both our keynote speakers are already in the room. No, don't worry, you don't have to talk for an hour. You have a shorter. It's just going to be an hour on the whole. So Mrs. Shiva was already a bit worried because she's prepared for 20 minutes, and now that I said an hour, I'm very sure you could do that anyway. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I know most of you will have read her biography, will have read the notes that were already on the net, but for those of you who might not know who our keynote speaker is, having arrived from India, she's actually a lady who practiced sustainability before the Brundtland Report came out. She founded her institute in 1982, that is 5 years before the Brundtland Report, and has been concentrating on the combination of ecology and social issues ever since. One of the mainstays of this wonderful lady, who is both a physicist, a philosopher, an environmentalist, an author, a speaker, and I could probably go on and on and on, and I will talk about some of the awards you've been given in a sec. Some of the issues are just core to what we are looking forward to in the future, because after all, in 2050, we're going to have 9 billion people on this planet, and yes, the answer is we could feed them. The question is just how, and how do we distribute it, and by what? Seeds, for example. Early on, you started making the Indians aware that they might actually have to look out for their own indigenous old seeds. But that was only one of the exploits and one of the routes that you took into the area of food. And I think the funniest thing is actually that you were advising the Tuscany, the region in Tuscany, the region in Italy, Tuscany, that everybody associates with good food, and you were advising them on how to improve their sense for food. So absolutely fabulous on this side. Ladies and gentlemen, we've had this morning Mr. van Uxküll here, and he was actually handing out one of his awards to you a number of years ago, and you're now a member of his foundation of the World Future Council, helping us think the right way and hopefully act the right way. I could go on like this, but I think you don't want to listen to me. You want to listen to her. Dr. Vandana Shiva, please take it away.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to join you in this closing session. But my home is in my heart and in my mind, because I come from the Himalaya. And 40 years ago, ordinary peasant women came out and told the world something the world had forgotten, that somehow forests were connected to water. Because the market value of timber, and it was a German forester who set up the system for the British in India on how to exploit forests. Forests were just that much square foot of timber. They were timber mines. And in 72 we had a horrible flood, and the women came out and said, these trees protect us. They prevent the landslides, they prevent the flooding. They gave us food, they give us fodder. They are our mothers, and you can't cut them. And they created one of the most amazing movements that became my University of Ecology. I did a PhD in the foundations of quantum theory in Canada. But my real PhD is with women who never went to school as professors. They came out and said, we're going to hug the trees, and you'll have to kill us before you kill the trees. It took 10 years for the government to realize what they were saying was true. Because when the floods came in 78, the government was putting out more money for flood relief than they were getting out of timber revenues. And after that, a logging ban was put in the catchments of the Ganges and the Yamuna, the area where I come from. The forest was saved from logging. But the frenzy of globalization, of speed, of building superhighways in the fragile Himalayas, dams, saying that electricity was the biggest produce of the mountains, not the water, of the rivers. It's created a situation that across the mountains in my region, we have landslides. And when the first rain came this year, 4 days ago, all of that rubble came down, filled the rivers. Literally, the dams and the roads have stolen the ecological space from the rivers. And when there's no space in the riverbed, obviously it's going to flood. When instead of space for water, all you have is landmass and mud and rocks and boulders, the rivers will find their way. 100 people have died till last night. I haven't seen a disaster like this. Our farm is under 1 foot of water. Agriculture is going to be devastated this year. Why? Because we are still carrying such an outmoded idea of the earth and the economy. I'm sure during the conference people have reminded us about the fact that both ecology and economy come from the same root, oikos, our home. We don't treat our planetary home as our home. We treat it as just raw material, dead, inert. We couldn't have had the rise of mechanistic science without declaring nature as dead. She wasn't living. We've had the opportunity to relearn that the earth is living through the Gaia hypothesis. And yet, an economy gone rogue. I've watched elephants that have gone rogue. They leave the herd and just destroy. An economy has gone rogue under globalization because it's no more grounded in the ecological limits of the planet. It's no more grounded in the human rights and human dignity of the last child, the last woman, the last person. We've come up with this strange idea of limitless growth on a limited planet. It's ecologically false, it's physically false, it's biologically false, and it's socially unjust. Because there's a very ancient text from India called the Isha-Upanishad that reminds us, if you take more than you need, then you are stealing. Because some other being, some other person, or the future generations have a right to those resources. So an economy of greed must be based on theft. And sadly, greed has been made the only value of our times. We are witnessing what it is costing us. We are witnessing how ecosystem after ecosystem is under collapse. We are witnessing how societies are on such a fragile edge that in Turkey it takes the protection of one park to create a crisis. In Egypt, the bread, a vegetable vendor in Tunisia. And we forget, Syria, it didn't start as a religious conflict. It was a protest by farmers around the drought. But we've learned how to create silos. The economy sits in a little box, insulated from everything else. But when you allow greed to be a virtue rather than a negative trait, it doesn't just reward the bankers. It doesn't just reward the CEOs. It does all that, but it changes the minds. It changes society. So economic values are social values. Economic values are ecological values. Values of exploitation of the earth end up destroying ecology. values that everything is an object, everything is a commodity, to be controlled, dominated, exploited, is what has transformed India from one of the safest places in the world for women and children, till a few years ago, to the capital of rape. Through December and January, you would have heard the rape stories. They continue. They haven't stopped. Because if that's the values that seep through our heads, then that's the behavior it creates. We've learned how to turn everything into an externality. And some of the biggest externalities are in the way we produce and distribute food. Now, if we did an honest analysis of the real costs of industrial agriculture, the real costs of poisons in our food, the real costs of GMOs,